Climbing within the Paris 2024 Olympic Games has kicked off. And within this news report, we'll be talking about the men's bouldering semi-finals that took place earlier this morning. We've also got an interview with Team GB athlete Erin Mcneice, who will be competing in the women's bouldering semi-finals tomorrow. And finally, UKC editor Zar White will be explaining how the Olympics work. In the men's bouldering semi-finals, the lowest seeded athletes came out first. And they, if anything, helped to contextualize the difficulty of the problems that faced competitors. Problem 1 definitely presented some significant issues for the first few people to try it. And the first person to make significant progress was Team GB athlete Hamish McArthur. The climbing style within Problem 1 was very much powerful and explosive, and Hamish made good progress but didn't quite make the top. The expectation was as the bigger names and higher seeded athletes came out that more tops would follow, but they didn't, or at least not in great number. In fact, even the almighty Adam Ondra failed to top Problem 1, despite getting close. The breakthrough moment came when Jakob Schubert topped Problem 1, once again proving that he is capable of raising the bar in those high stakes moments. Just moments after, French athlete Sam Avazou topped the fourth problem over at the other end of the mat. And by this point in the game, it was clear that a top was going to put you at the business end of the scoreboard. Adam Ondra followed suit by also topping Problem 4, and his celebration showed just how much it meant to him. And Problem 4 also saw a top from Japanese athlete Tomoa Narasaki, who, having failed to collect a medal at his home Olympics in Tokyo, is definitely a contender for one at Paris. From a Team GB perspective, there is no athlete as exciting as Toby Roberts, who comes into the Olympic Games on fine form. He came agonisingly close to the top of Problem 1. In fact, most of the audience thought he had topped Problem 1, but something, perhaps he didn't hold it for long enough or wasn't in enough control, for some reason that top did not count. He then proceeded to make the final move of Problem 2 and got as far as anyone did on Problem 3, which was very much the bogey problem of the set out today. This meant there was a lot riding on the fourth problem, the slab, but thankfully Toby managed it on his fourth nail-biting attempt. However, the man of the moment throughout the semi-finals today was undoubtedly 17-year-old Japanese athlete Sorato Anraku. Sorato came out and made a quick and positively casual ascent of the first problem, and the only top of Problem 2 throughout the day, again making it look so straightforward. At this point it looked like he was going to cruise the entire set, but interestingly he didn't manage to top either Problems 3 or 4. However, being the only person to top 2 problems that day, he finished in a solid first place. Credit where it's due to the route setters, as the problems split the field well and were both interesting to watch and climb from the athlete's perspective. It would have been great to have seen Problem 3 topped, but alas, seeing the others topped and in such good style, we're impressed by what they've done. It's all to play for though, as the bouldering only represents half of the combined format, and lead representing the other. Now the scores from the bouldering today get added onto the lead scores from Wednesday's semi-final. That creates that combined total, which defines who goes through into the finals. Speaking of Wednesday, keep an eye out for those lead specialists, such as Alberto Jimenez Lopez, Colin Duffy, and Alex Magos, because this will very much be their time to shine. But, as we know, anything can happen in the Olympics, and I've no doubt there'll be some magic moments on Wednesday, so tune in for more. The format in Paris differs from how it was in the Tokyo Olympics, with combined just consisting of lead and boulder. And speed now is no longer a part of that, but has its own separate set of medals. UKC editor Zar White tells us more about how this actually works.
Sport climbing at the Paris Olympics is split into 2 events, the combined boulder and lead climbing and the speed climbing. While speed climbing is relatively simple, whoever gets to the top of the wall the fastest wins, boulder and lead are both slightly more complex in terms of the climbing itself as well as the ways in which the disciplines are scored. For both the men and the women, the combined climbing at the Olympic Games will kick off with bouldering. Bouldering happens on shorter walls, around 4.5 meters at the Paris Games, and above thick foam mats without ropes. As the walls are short, bouldering is all about squeezing as much difficulty as possible into that small space, whether that's challenging the climber's strength, balance, coordination, flexibility, or problem solving. Bouldering certainly has the most complex rules of the two disciplines, but broadly speaking, here they are. The climber must start in a specific position, with 4 bits of tape marking the holds where the climber's 4 limbs must be when they begin climbing. This means that getting into the starting position can be a challenging move in and of itself. Once the climber is established in the starting position, they then have to get as far up the wall as they possibly can in as few attempts as possible. There are 3 spots on the wall at which the climber can earn points: a low zone, a high zone, and the top. The low zone is worth 5 points, the high zone is worth 10 points, and the top is worth 25 points. Climbers must control the zone holds in order to get the points associated with them, meaning they cannot simply jump and slap at a zone hold and get the points. Similarly, the climber must show control of the finishing position by matching the final hold on the wall, meaning that they must have at least 1 digit per hand touching the final hold, again in a controlled manner, in order to be awarded the 25 points. Climbers are given 5 minutes and unlimited attempts to climb the boulders. However, each unsuccessful attempt is punished by a 0.1 point deduction. This means that if a climber reaches the low zone on their first attempt, they will be awarded 5 points, but if they reach the high zone on their second attempt, the overall score would increase to 9.9, as the high zone is worth 10 points, but their previous attempt would now be considered an unsuccessful attempt to reach the high zone, hence the 0.1 point deduction. There are 4 separate boulders in each round, each with a maximum score of 25 points for a potential total of 100 points. Where bouldering is all about condensed difficulty and intensity, lead climbing dials down the difficulty of the climbing, but ramps up the demands on the climber's endurance, rewarding smooth and efficient climbing as well as precision of movement. Where bouldering walls are 4.5 meters in height, the lead wall is 15 meters high, and where bouldering allows unlimited attempts across 4 boulders within 5 minutes for each boulder, there is only 1 lead route. Climbers only get 1 attempt on it, and they only have 6 minutes to get as far as they possibly can. As with the bouldering, the ultimate goal is to top the route, meaning you reach the final hold. However, scoring in the lead round is slightly different, with each of the final 40 holds counting towards the climber's overall score. Here are the rules. The route will have roughly 45 holds on the wall, with the upper 40 counting as scoring holds and with the scores accumulating as the climber gets higher up the wall. The final 10 holds will be worth 4 points each. The 10 holds that precede them are worth 3 points each. The 10 before that are worth 2 points each, and the 10 before that are worth 1 point each. If the climber makes it to the top of the route, they receive a total of 100 points. It's easier to work out when you're watching, as the scores should tick upwards on the screen as the climber gets higher. But essentially, the higher you get up the wall, the more heavily weighted each individual move is in terms of scoring. If a climber falls whilst moving upwards towards a hold, they are then given an additional 0.1 points in order to reward the progression beyond the hold in question, whilst another climber may have only managed to reach the hold but not move past it. Whilst bouldering happens above mats and without ropes, lead climbing happens with harnesses and with ropes, meaning that the climber must clip themselves into quick draws as they climb up the route in order to remain safe. For safety reasons, these quick draws must be clipped in order, otherwise the climber could receive a penalty. If a climber reaches the top of the route, they must both hold the top hold and clip the final quick draw in order to be awarded a top of the route. So how are the scores from boulder and lead combined? With 4 boulders worth 25 points apiece for a total of 100 points, and with a lead route worth a maximum of 100 points in total, each discipline is weighted equally. The 2 scores are simply added together for a total score out of 200. Once the semi-finals are over, the climbers with the top 8 scores will progress into the final, where the scores are wiped. The climbers will then have 4 brand new boulders and a brand new lead route to climb in the final. Again, scores from Boulder and lead rounds will be added together, and the overall score will dictate who takes home the medals.
Tomorrow, on Tuesday the 6th of August at 9 AM UK time, the women's bouldering semi-final kicks off. And one athlete we'll be keeping a special eye out for is Team GB athlete Erin Mcneice. We caught up with Erin a few weeks ago to talk to her about what it was like to qualify for the Olympics.
Erin Mcneice was the dark horse of the 2024 season in the run-up to the Paris Olympics. Few would have expected to see a new name making finals in both the lead and Boulder World Cup ahead of the Olympic qualifier series, but they certainly knew who Erin was by the time she stepped up to compete in Shanghai. And her 2 third-place finishes in the OQS marked her out as an exciting new finals contender in Paris. Even within the UK scene, her back-to-back British lead climbing championship victories and Climbing Works International Festival and Plywood Masters wins hadn't marked her out as an Olympic contender. Erin has lived in multiple places all over the world and followed her dad Carl into the sport, making one of the most impressive transitions from junior level, where she did not podium in IFSC events, was the result of a brutal training regime, which she began last September after qualifying for the Olympic qualifying series. Consisting of 6 to 9 hours per day of training and climbing, and only 1 rest day a week, her hard work has paid off. First finals, first podium at the OQS, and an Olympic ticket. Equally adept at both boulder and lead, and equally comfortable with both dynamic coordination and slow technical movement, Erin is a rare breed in a competition format that rewards consistency across the board and a wide repertoire of skills. Do not underestimate Erin's quiet confidence. On the wall, her strength and knowledge of movement and timing speak for themselves.
We're here with one of Britain's most recently qualified Olympic athletes, Erin Mcneice. So Erin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Erin, should we just take it back to the beginning and talk a bit about how you started climbing? Because Natalie Berry, our chief editor, in the notes that she had made me had said that she thought your dad had climbed, that you'd live a few different places, and you'd also been into, was it skateboarding? Do you want to talk us a bit through your journey?
Yeah, so I started climbing when I was 5. My parents took me to a climbing wall. It was like a half climbing, half skateboarding, which is how I got into the skateboarding part. But my family was really sporty growing up. My dad competed in gymnastics when he was a bit younger, so I was always doing different sports, and climbing was just one of them. Yeah, I moved around quite a bit, so lived in Hong Kong and lived in Malaysia for a bit, so really got to, I got a very wide variety of sports, like surfing thrown in there and stuff, so I guess climbing was just my favourite one, which is saying something, because yeah, definitely just, my parents just threw me into everything, and that was just the one that stuck.
And what do you think it was that drew you to climbing in particular then, or what was it that meant that climbing became that number one?
I think as I grew up, I just enjoyed going to climbing more than I enjoyed the other ones. I was doing football quite near before I fully committed to climbing. I was doing football as well, and sort of at one point dreaded going to football and absolutely loved going climbing, so it was just that I was like, this one's clearly my favourite, so I'm going to stop and put all my efforts.
And in terms of the disciplines, at the time, were you bouldering, were you lead climbing, or just a bit of a blend from the beginning?
I was definitely doing both from the beginning. They have pretty big lead walls in Malaysia, or the one that I went to was quite big, so I was doing that from quite young. But bouldering was definitely my favourite for quite a long time, but yeah, now it's very equal.
How would you describe your climbing, I guess, throughout that time as well? Was it sort of recreational to begin with, and then did you start training more with mind to doing competitions, or?
Yeah, it was definitely recreational for the longest time. Moving back to England, it was still recreational, and then I did a few nationals and started training a bit more for that, and got onto the GB team pretty soon after I started training. But it's only recently that the training's properly picked up, in the last maybe 2 years. So there's been like every 2 years there's been sort of like a step up in training.
And what were your experiences then as a competing junior as well, both on the sort of national and international stage?
Pretty hectic for me. I got onto the senior team when I was still a junior, so I was doing junior comps and senior comps, and I wanted to try and get as much experience in the senior comps as I could, so I didn't necessarily prioritise results, I just prioritised getting experience, and I was doing my education at the same time, so yeah, it was quite full on for a few years.
And how do you find those early years of competing as a senior when, you know, you're at the, I guess, younger end of the spectrum, basically, because it's quite a step up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a massive step up. My first World Cup was so it's such a bigger event than a youth comp that you feel like you need to change everything just because it's this massive event. So it definitely it took me a little while to get settled into the scene, and just looking at everybody competing at that level, I knew that I wasn't at that level. I scraped into semis once, but barely, and I just knew that I had so far to go to get there.
How is it competing again against people that you've potentially really looked up to or idolised? You know, Shauna Coxey, we were just catching up with earlier. It's kind of weird in climbing because you're basically in with your heroes.
Yeah, it's definitely intense because obviously you go into isolation and everybody's in there, so it's and especially me because I really love to watch the old World Cups. I used to binge watch them. I knew all the semi-finalists for each event. I knew how many they topped and stuff. So going into ISO, I was just looking at everybody's and just memorised their stats, and yeah, it was definitely weird having them all there in one small space.
And how's the atmosphere behind the scenes there? Is it quite intimidating, or are people quite welcoming? Is it quite social?
In qualification, I always find it quite intimidating. There's so many people, and it's sort of they're not really paying attention to you because there's just so many people in there. And semis is also, it's the most intense round because it's cut from 20 to 6 or 8. So yes, quite intense. Finals, I don't have much experience with, only 4 finals for me, but in my experience it's sort of less intense because everybody who's in the finals is really, I guess, they're quite close, all in ability, so it's not as intense.
How were those early World Cups as well in terms of just experience for you? We've talked a lot about getting athletes just to these events simply so that they gain that experience and can then take that on to other events. But what did you learn throughout those that you've managed to bring to this year?
There are little things I learned, confidence was a big one in my first Boulder World Cup. Like I said, I felt like I needed to change everything when I should have just treated it like a normal training day, basically.
What would you change out of interest?
This changed my approach to everything. I changed my warm-up, but I changed the way that I climbed. I was climbing it like it was a World Cup boulder, which it is, but like it was a World Cup boulder that was so far out of my reach just because it was in a World Cup. So basically being confident and not changing anything, and small things about making sure you're in cool zone at the right time and stuff. But mainly I guess I just learned that I wasn't good enough to compete at the level, which was all sort of fuel to the fire.
Which probably brings us on quite nicely to present day, where, this year it's been an amazing thing to watch because it just feels like you've been riding on the crest of the wave. You've been not just making finals, you've not been scraping your way into finals, you've been absolutely solid, basically. You've been stood on the podium. And what changed then? Because, going from what you've described as a, season that was worthwhile from a participation point of view and a learning experience to being stood up alongside the great and good of the comp climbing world.
It feels pretty crazy. I think pretty much everything had to change. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't so many things. I couldn't just focus on a couple things because I didn't just have a couple weaknesses. I had so many. So it's just pretty brutal focusing on every aspect of it, focusing on the mental as well. And I think everybody was so good in the season that I was sort of really hard on myself during the off season. I was like, I'm not good enough yet, I'm not good enough yet. It sort of made me push harder until I actually am at the level, which I'm still surprised at, to be honest.
I mean, you seem to have like a really wide repertoire of skills as well. You're good at the technical, but you're also good at the explosive. I mean, how do you go about, you know, in the world of modern day comp climbing and, you know, the sort of way in which problems are set or routes are set now, how do you go about absorbing all of that during a training session to then unleash it during a comp itself?
Yeah, it's quite hard. I've found that widening my circle of people who I work with is like a bit risky because people have different opinions and they can clash and stuff, but for me it meant that if there was something small, like tiny even, that someone realised was maybe a weakness or something that wasn't as good as my other skills, then that would be like immediately identified and we'd work it, so I never really miss too much.
What would you say your strongest strength is?
I don't know if I really have any strengths. Maybe like.
You definitely have strengths.
I think I'm very okay at everything. I don't think I have a weakness. Maybe like laches or something I'm quite good at.
Maybe that's it actually. I mean, being good at everything as opposed to great at one thing but not actually being able to do coordination jumps would be a real weakness, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's good because I never walk out to a boulder or a lead and I'm scared for a move. I'm always confident at everything.
And in terms of the psychological side as well, I mean, have you found, like, you know, doing well at comps, is that something that you thrive off, or is it a really tricky thing to build with the weight of expectation? Where do you sit within the balance there?
I think the China World Cups at the start of the year just gave me confidence because it was my first boulder final, my first lead semi-final, and then my first lead final. So it sort of just gave me confidence for OQS because I was good at it. Showed me that I was equal at both and good at both. But podium at OQS definitely could have. I had to work hard to take the pressure off because I'd put myself in a good position for an Olympic ticket, but also it still wasn't a given. So I had to sort of calm myself down before that one.
Yeah, how was it going into Budapest then, off of the back of that?
It was a bit nerve-wracking, especially because my competition didn't start that amazingly. I got a 16th in boulder qualies. My fingers were really sweaty. I didn't manage the heat well, and it was a bit stressful going into lead qualies the next day. But I sort of just before the event, I forgot completely about the Olympics. I wanted to climb my best, and my main goal was to make finals. So I was just focused on that instead.
So what are your goals going into the games?
At the moment, it's sort of just I want to go in knowing that I'm at my strongest that I've ever been, and I want to perform my best and climb my hardest and manage my mental state. I'd love to make finals, but I don't want to focus too much on the result beforehand. But yeah, I guess finals, that would be my dream Olympic finals.
Focus on each round at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Taking each day at a time is such a big event, and I'm sure it'll be overwhelming, so just take it one day at a time and see how it goes.
On the note of it being overwhelming, is there anything you're going to put in place throughout to sort of help turn off the noise? Do you actually turn off things like social media throughout?
I don't tune out too much. I used to do it, I used to sort of try and ignore the crowd and ignore the commentator and ignore all of these stressful things, but I think part of my new mental shift has been to just take in the entire experience, and the crowd is part of the experience, and it might be pressuring, but the pressure is also the part of the experience, so soak it all in instead of trying to tune it out is a lot easier for me to deal with.
And everyone, I think, as well, will be so psyched for you. This is not an England football team scenario. It's actually just it's not just the nation, but the world basically just psyched to see you on the stage and just hopefully having the time of your life on the way.
Yeah, it means so much more than people think just to be supporting me. I feel it even if you're at home or you're at the event or a message on Instagram, whatever it is, it's invaluable to me, and it really just helps the whole experience. It makes it so much better.
And what advice would you give to a junior who's competing, looking to move on to the sort of senior or the international stage?
So if it's your passion and you love it, then go for it, and it's not going to be easy, but that's what makes it so good, and it's such a big step up from juniors to seniors, like I've said, but just give yourself time and work hard, and there's every possibility that you could do it.
And any plans for after the Olympics as well, once that this, the pressure is off?
I want to do the rest of the season when I finish the Olympics, so.
A sucker for punishment.
Yeah, I'd like to do European Champs, which is quite close after, and the rest of the World Cup season and the Seoul World Cups at the end of the year. I'm really looking forward to those.
And after that you can relax?
After that I can maybe have a week holiday and then get into the off season.
Brill, Erin, thanks for joining us anyway. We're really looking forward to seeing you competing, and just hope you have a great time.
Thank you, I will.
Stay tuned for more daily reports on this channel, or tune in to ukclimbing.com for more in-depth analysis and news.